We got a lot to talk about, and I'm going to kick it off with Sotiropoulous versus Pearson. It's the finale for The Ultimate Fighter that we didn't see airing in Australia, and it's going to air this Friday on FX, and it's actually taking place Saturday in Australia, but due to the time difference, it'll be live here on Friday night. So, Ryan, what are your thoughts on this show?
There's two interesting fights. Sotiropoulous and Pearson should be fairly competitive. I think Sotiropoulous will probably take it, but Ross Pearson's always been a very interesting fighter in that he's very talented, but at times he seems to underperform. And Sotiropoulous, you could argue a lot of the same qualities are found in him. Then I think the opener on the FX card is former Bellator star Hector Lombard fighting the man only known as Paul Harris, submission expert Rusamar Paul Harris, who's always fun to watch, but sometimes has spectacularly bad fights.
Yeah, there's a yin and yang to Paul Harris that if you give him a limb, he'll take it home with. If you don't, he might run out of options. He's one of those guys that you don't ever get in a leg lock with, but other than that, you can find a way to beat him. So, Hector Lombard needs to find a way to beat somebody because his first fight in UFC was pretty subpar.
I don't know if he was I think I heard he was injured, or his camp said he was injured or ill or something going into the Tim Boetsch fight, and that's why he performed so poorly. I'd say Paul Harris is arguably a notch below Boetsch on the middleweight pecking order, especially considering that Boetsch is probably a win away from a title shot. But I don't know, with Lombard, he has lost precisely 0 fights due to submissions. So you'd argue that maybe he has the advantage because Paul Harris can only ever beat people by submission. But I don't know, if he keeps being a preliminary, an outside fighter, maybe Paul Harris takes this one.
Yeah, it's a strong possibility that the apple cart could be overturned and he could take his second loss. But it's just, I have a hard time figuring out if Lombard is going to be the kind of dominant fighter he was in Bellator, because you said it yourself. He was a guy that came in with nothing but unlimited potential, and then just where did that potential go? I suppose these other two fights must be the finals of this season, and regretfully, I don't know these guys because they didn't air this show at us. Do you know anything about Whittaker and Scott or Fletcher and Park, or are you in the same boat I am?
I think most people are in the same boat. Looking at the handy Wikipedia page for these fighters, Colin Fletcher is 29. He's from Sunderland, England. He is an 8-1 fighter with 7 submission wins, so it appears that he has a good submission game. He's won his last 4 fights, and he's won his way into these finals. He'll be fighting fellow Brit Norman Park, who has the imaginative nickname of Stormin Norman Park. Stormin Norman Park is from Northern Ireland. He is affiliated with Drysdale Jiu-Jitsu. I believe that's in Las Vegas. And much like his opponent, he is a submissions fighter as well. He has a 16-2 record with 12 submission wins. So this could very much be a grappling battle, which could be fun, or depending on how good these guys are, it could turn into a very boring fight.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm always afraid of with two submission guys, is that it turns into a stand-up fight, because neither one of them wants to go to the ground.
Looking at the other fight, Robert Whittaker he's 21. He was born in New Zealand, but he is fighting out of Menai, New South Wales in Australia. He has a 9-2 record with every single fight being a knockout or submission. It's about a 50-50 split between those two. He lost his last fight going into the Ultimate Fighter Smash's house, and he's lost 2 of his last 4 against people I have never heard of in my life. He's fighting the Brit, Brad Scott, who is from Somerset, England. He has an 8-1 record with 5 knockouts and 3 submissions, so both of these guys are, it looks like fairly well-rounded. Neither of these guys has gone to a decision, at least... Whittaker lose by this year. Between these two guys, they've had something like 25 fights, and they have 1 decision between them. So it should hopefully be a good action fight. And the fact that both these guys have a fair amount of wins by a knockout means that they can probably just, go wherever. Sotiropoulous and Pearson should be fairly competitive. I think Sotiropoulous will probably take it, but Ross Pearson's always been a very interesting fighter in that he's very talented, but at times he seems to underperform. And Sotiropoulous, you could argue a lot of the same qualities are found in him.
I could not agree more. So instead of agreeing more, I'll move on because we got an Ultimate Fighter finale to talk about. Team Carwin versus Team Nelson. Although Team Nelson is going to have a new opponent because Team Carwin, Shane Carwin, got injured and he cannot take the main event. So stepping in to replace him is Matt Meathead Mitrione. What do you think of this main event for this card?
The main event and the card in general, like it's not quite pay-per-view quality, but holy cow, like, from top to bottom, Roy Nelson and Mitrione, like Nelson, is just an absolute scrapper. He's, arguably the highest of high-level Joey Beltran-esque fighters where, Roy does not care if he wins or loses. He always brings in, he had that fight with Verdum where he just absolutely he was not in the same league as Verdum, but he came and fought and, fought his heart out. Matt Mitrione's always an entertaining fighter. He's one of a lot of surprisingly skilled heavyweights that came out of that season of The Ultimate Fighter with himself and Brendan Schaub, and I think there's a couple other guys. I'm very excited for this fight. Matt Mitrione has 2 decisions in his career and 4 very entertaining knockouts. Speaking of, Mitrione had an excellent fight with Beltran a couple years ago, and Roy Nelson is a character. He's always has really fun antics and fun fights. So, in short, I'm really looking forward to the main event.
Yeah, I'm pretty jacked for it too, and I always hate making the statement that somebody's getting knocked out in this fight because then I turn out to be wrong and it goes to a decision. But you really get that feeling with these 2 guys that there's just no way they're both walking out of the cage.
This rate, what's the old saying? Someone's going to the hospital, someone's going to the winner's circle, something like that. This is going to be a very, very violent fight, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it should be a great one to watch. And I'm also looking forward to the finale of this season. It's not been the highest ratings ever for an Ultimate Fighter season. In fact, I think actually it might have been the lowest. But I have enjoyed the show. And Mike Ricci has developed into something of a character in the course of the season by turning on his fellow Canadian and kind of presenting himself as the douchebag who doesn't care. He'll do what it takes because he's here to win. F everything else. And that makes him a compelling character. And Colton Smith is coming in there as the Army Ranger who's never going to quit in a fight and won't take crap from anybody. And I think it's a great dynamic for a main event.
Well, it's made excellent television. Like since I think the first few weeks of The Ultimate Fighter were very sleepy in terms of there wasn't a lot of characters and guys seemed very tentative to sort of let themselves go in the house. Since the semis and since Ricci asked to have that fight with the other Canadian, whose name I forget, the guy from BC, but Ricci's been fantastic. He's sort of shades of his buddy Rory McDonald. He's another TriStar guy. He's got very, very good skills, and this should be a really good fight. I see it possibly playing out a lot like a lot of TriStar fights with Ricci just neutralizing Smith and trying to decision him out, but Ricci had one of the few finishes of this season of The Ultimate Fighter in the last episode. So this should be a fantastic fight. I think the dynamic in the joint at the Hard Rock will be very interesting because we'll see how well the fans from Seattle travel, because I have a feeling the crowd will be very much against Mr. Ricci and very much behind Colton Smith.
I've got that feeling as well. We'll see how it plays out on TV, but Pat Barry has a lot of charisma, and he's a showman in the cage, and he's got that whole hyper die thing going for him. And I've never seen Shane Del Rosario as a guy that has a lot of charisma, so I think the crowd will just, whether Barry's doing well or not, I think they'll gravitate toward him.
Pat Barry strikes me as another guy sort of from the Joey Beltran school where his record's not spectacular, but he's always had pretty good fights. Like he's been there, he got a knockout over Christian Moorcraft. He has a very entertaining win with Joey Beltran. He beat Hard Dog, but he's got, even in his losses, you can't really hold losing to LeVar Johnson against him. Stephen Struve's very good. Czech Congo's always dangerous. He fought Crow Cop, and they had that fantastic fight in Vancouver where they sort of stopped and hugged in the middle of it. Pat Barry's been, part of some of MMA's most memorable moments in the last 5 years, and I'm very glad to see he gets a chance to sort of show his wares again on a big stage.
I just want at some point Pat Barry to live up to the hype, no pun, and just go on a win streak and get like 3 or 4 wins in a row because some of those losses that he's taken have just been like, really?